Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2020 Composites UK Annual Conference. I'm Sue Halliwell, I'm Operations Manager at Composites UK, and I'll be moderating the event this afternoon. We've all faced some challenging times over the last few months as the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the globe. And although we're now entering the start of the recovery stage, the long-term impact of the crisis is still unfolding. Our conference today will look at the future of the UK composites industry, potential opportunities across various end sectors, and most importantly, how we can work together as a sector to optimise these. So just a few housekeeping points before we get started. Your mic and cameras are turned off by default. Please therefore type any questions you have in the Q&A facility at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'll then put questions to each speaker at the end of their presentation, so please feel free to add questions as we go through the presentations. We'll aim to get through as many questions as time allows, and then we'll follow up any that we can't cover after the event. You'll all receive a copy of the full set of slides from today and a link to the recording of the event itself. Before I hand over to our first speaker, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to Composites UK for the benefit of those not familiar with the association. There we go. Composites UK was founded 31 years ago as the trade association to support the UK fibre composites industry. A key role is to bring companies together throughout the supply chain to help develop business partnerships. We represent around 380 companies from across all parts of the supply chain. And as you can see, our membership has increased dramatically over the last 10 years, and I'm really pleased to say is holding fairly steady during the current crisis period. We're a unified voice for industry, providing input to the strategic body, the Composites Leadership Forum, or CLF, as I'll refer to it later, as well as various government departments on legislative, trade, funding and other matters. And we've been working extremely closely with government during the last few months to ensure that our sector has received and continues to receive the support it needs to weather the COVID-19 storm. See if I can go back a slide. There we go. So why do Composites join? Well, I've just put this slide up and it demonstrates the breadth of our key activity areas. I'm not going to go through each in detail because you'll hear about some of them a little bit later. But all of our activities are focused on supporting our members to be better informed, to develop their network, to collaborate, and to promote their business in the UK and overseas. This will then enable them to capitalise on the growth of the global composites market. And if you'd like any information on any of these activities, whether you're an existing or potential member, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And so on to the main event. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. David Bailey, CEO of Composites UK. David will look at the impact of COVID-19 across the sector and what we've done and are doing to support businesses through this. David, over to you.
Often important to remember to unmute the microphone first. But thank you, Sue. As you say, I am going to talk through, let me see if I can move the slides. Talk through the impact of COVID-19 on the composites sector from a very high level, the response of Composites UK in support of its members, talk about the hub report that we've developed and how that can be used to inform local and national strategies, talk about how the composite sector can contribute to a green industrial strategy, and then how I think we can secure recovery and build growth. But I recognise I'm the newest member of the team. I only joined Composites UK in February as we were about to move towards lockdown. So I thought great opportunity for me to talk to the members a little bit about myself and my background. So I started out in the aerospace sector as an engineering apprentice with Airbus at the Broughton site in 1986. I was fortunate to be one of the first apprentices to be sponsored to do a degree in aeronautical engineering, and then later went on to work in the Rolls-Royce Technology Centre in combustion aerodynamics, where I completed my PhD. I joined Alstom in 1995 and worked in the power generation sector for 10 years. I was head of technology and led Alstom's future technology and European research and technology programs. I then joined the Northwest Aerospace Alliance, trade association for the aerospace and defence sector in the northwest of England in 2005, and led over £30 million of technology and supply chain development programs. I was appointed to chief executive appointed to chief executive in 2014. I still sit on the board of the Aerospace Growth Partnership, representing all of the regions of the UK, and was made a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society in 2017. As I said earlier, I joined Composites UK in February 2020, and I've been working with the board and the team to develop and deploy Composites UK's new strategy, which I'll present in the annual general meeting later. Global pandemic has had significant impacts on a number of sectors, but most noticeably the automotive sector as a result of closure of car dealerships, and the aerospace sector as a result of the bans on travel and the reductions in passenger numbers. We've also had the impact on the ability to bring workforces back safely, which has impacted all businesses. But market reports suggest at the moment a decline from $90 billion of revenues in 2019 to $83 billion by 2021. So an impact of about 4.5% down. And we have to take that in mind, that the previous forecasts were for 7.7% compound annual growth rates to 2024. So in that respect, a sort of 12% impact on the industry. Automotive has been hit particularly hard. So the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders has reported car manufacturing down by 95% in May and 42% across the year to date. And we've got significant falls in commercial vehicle manufacturing and in engine manufacturing, which is such a key capability to the United Kingdom. On that basis, the expected impact across the year is of the order of about a third, which is actually comparable also to the aerospace sector. Importantly, whilst these impacts are to a certain extent temporary, it's the length of time to get back to where we were pre-COVID that's important, and both automotive and aerospace are talking about up to 5 years to return to pre-COVID levels of production. The sector that I've probably got the most experience in, aerospace, had a fall of passenger numbers of over 90% at the start of the crisis. Both Airbus and Boeing have announced between 30 and 40% reductions in aircraft production rates across 2020 and 2021. And that's for an industry that's been used to typically year-on-year growth rates of around about 5% since the 1970s, even through Gulf crises, oil crises, financial crisis, 9/11, SARS. We've not really seen anything as significant as COVID-19. And so production levels there are forecast not to get back to 2019 levels for 5 to 7 years. And there's clearly an impact more on the larger aircraft, the wide-body aircraft, the A330neo, A350, B787, the 777X, because of that potential reluctance to fly long haul, but also because some of those destinations at the moment, we've still got significant COVID-19 impacts. It's interesting that the defence sector has not been impacted as much, certainly not in 2020. I know some companies have seen some growth in defence spending, but we do expect that there will be cuts in line with future GDP falls, and also we're concerned about how defence sector will be affected by any impacts from the civil aerospace supply chain. Just to give you a feel for some of those aircraft numbers, so you can see here, the big one for us really, Airbus A320neo. We were at rate 63 in 2019 and going higher, but predicted cuts back to rate 40. So that's a significant loss of work for both Airbus and its supply chain. You can also see on here some of the aircraft engines that go on these planes, and you can see how an organisation like Rolls-Royce is actually very focused on the very large aircraft, which causes them particular strategic issues. However, there are opportunities, and particularly in areas of innovation that UK has capability in. And I do think that we now need to be thinking about how we influence government strategy and how we influence government procurement and spending, such that the composite sector can support that build strategy. And I'll come to that later in terms of build back better, build back greener, and build back faster. But I think from a government perspective, the composite sector with its capabilities, particularly in construction, can support that recovery strategy. Some of you might recognise these sort of 4 phases that lots of businesses have been through. I've used this graph for the aerospace sector, which is probably a little bit more dramatic than organisations in other sectors, but the principle is much the same. We've seen a fall off in business quite rapidly through Q2. Organisations then stabilising, then into a recovery phase, and then we'll start to think about where we grow back to in the new normal. And one of the things I just wanted to do was give you a feel for what Composites UK has been doing in support of its members. So very early on, we've been spreading Her Majesty's Government advice. We've supported the development of PPE supply chains, and also for ventilators. So many of our organisations have engaged in that important activity. We've communicated Her Majesty's Government funding support, the C-bills, the tax deferments, the VAT deferments, etc., bounce back loans. We've been doing trade surveys to help inform government and the industry in terms of what's going on. We've done, I think, and Sue led this, an excellent piece of work around health and safety planning and getting back to work safely. I think a document that will have helped many businesses. We've been informing industrial policy as we've been through this period. And I think going forwards, we're going to need to support members with support to resize. I think we're going to need to think about how we recapitalise the supply chain. I think competition is going to be pretty brutal, so we need to understand how we help improve competitiveness. We need to make sure that UK supply chains are globally competitive for when the work returns. We need to help companies find new customers and new programs, both from a UK and international perspective. I think we're going to need to support skills and training more flexibly. I think I'm particularly concerned about apprenticeships at the moment. I'd like to understand how training schools and colleges might be able to provide additional support, especially for continuing the employment of apprenticeships in their second and third years. And then last but not least, getting ready for the technology shifts that are coming. So we've had lots and lots of discussions about whether the current crisis creates opportunities around automation and digitalization and changing business models. So lots of stuff there that Composites UK and the team have already done, lots of stuff that we already know we're going to need to contribute to going forwards. I'd just like to bring your attention to the UK hub report that was produced recently. This report is based on over 1,500 companies and data that populate our hub database. It's an excellent piece of work. I've been really impressed with this as I've come into Composites UK. We've produced the first report. I think it's really valuable to any organisation looking to develop regional, national strategy for development and business growth. The report identifies organisations by region. We've even produced organisations by local enterprise partnership and by devolved administration. So it starts to tell us where the particular hotspots in the UK, where we've got critical mass of capability and where we want to influence local decision making in support of our members. It looks at primary markets, and clearly aerospace, construction, automotive and marine are some of our primary markets, but it's important to recognise that many Composites UK members are cross-sector and work in a number of different industries and actually are probably well protected on that basis. There's also information in the hub database on the specialisms in each region, and I think that type of information can be really useful to members trying to find new customers or source new suppliers. And then from a national, regional and local government perspective, we want to be able to help identify gaps in the sector and support investment strategies. You'll notice that I've coloured this one green. I had to, given the topic, but I think it's becoming increasingly clear that in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, the UK government is going to build on the budget with additional measures around green industrial strategy. And that presents the composites sector with both opportunities and risks. So the opportunities arise, for example, from increasing usage of composite materials and lightweighting, and how that impacts on all types of vehicles and the electrification strategy. And we know that we've got materials with excellent properties for lightweighting, durability and longevity. So we can contribute to those sustainable solutions, and we can contribute to that build strategy of UK government. However, that stronger environmental focus is also going to bring a stronger focus around environmental policy and legislation. In 2019, Composites UK published our vision and roadmap for sustainable composites, and that was based on lots of professionals' input from industry, academia, the materials supply chain, from experts in the circular economy and waste management. And we built that roadmap using University of Cambridge's IFM, world-renowned technology road mapping process. So we've got a really good foundation there. I think that roadmap can help us drive partnerships and generate new technologies to help the composite sector contribute to that more environmentally and socially sustainable future. And that's going to mean that we need to transition to a circular economy. We're going to need to drive even further the development of the types of recycling solutions for composites as those that have been emerging from the likes of the Rediscover project led by our National Composite Centre. And then to securing recovery and building growth, UK Composite Centre contributes significantly to many priority industries, including aerospace and automotive. Composites UK members invest in local economies across every region of the UK, as you could see from that previous chart. And we can contribute to the government's levelling up agenda through the provision of skilled people with high value jobs. I think it's important to recognise the government's actions in support of business through this crisis. However, I think we need to encourage government to go further. We would urge the government to consider further support to protect jobs and retain skills in sectors where the impact of COVID-19 will last longer and employment is worst hit. I think we can also support UK industry by accelerating procurement in adjacent sectors where we have influence over procurement decisions. And I think we need to boost investment in innovation to deliver on the UK's net zero ambitions by increasing funding for green technologies and the circular economy. And final point, I think it's going to require all the skills and capabilities of the organisations presenting today to support the UK's composite industry through these difficult times. And that's, for me, is Composites UK, Composites Leadership Forum, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, and particularly National Composite Centre, working together to support the sector. I also look forward to learning in more detail the challenges and opportunities in the automotive, construction and rail sectors from our expert speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We've not had any questions as yet in through the question and answer chat, but if you have got anything you'd like to ask, please pop it in there. I think it's important also for any members that haven't received a copy of the HUD report and you would like to receive one, please get in touch with the office and we'll send one through. As David said, this is a really important piece of work, primarily delivered by Charlotte and David. So yeah, if you've not already seen that, then please get in touch with us and we'll send a copy on to you.
Thank you, Sue. I'm happy to join in the questions at the end of the session.
Okay, if there's no questions at the moment, we'll move on. Please, if you think of anything you'd like to ask after the event, by all means, please drop us a line and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with that. So thank you very much, David. Our next speaker, Mr. Ken Smart, is Executive Director of Business Strategy at McLaren Automotive. He's also Chair of the Composites Leadership Forum, and he's now going to look at the future of the UK composite sector, the challenges it faces, and some of the solutions to overcome these barriers. Ken, over to you.
Well, thank you, Sue, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, David. If you could put up the next slide for me, please. Perhaps worth starting with what the Composites Leadership Forum is, and perhaps as importantly, what it isn't. It's not an alternative to Composites UK. It's not a trade association, nor is it a government body. But what it is an organisation that spans between government and industry and academia. And our primary mission is to take a more long-term view of the future of our industry, recognising all of the challenges that David has just talked about in the short term, but for us to take a long-term view and build a strategy that's appropriate to the future, looking out at just how much growth this industry could bring, getting a strategy together which the government can use to attract inward investment at the same time as industry using to focus its research and development efforts in areas of the largest growth. So we're not a trade association. All of these bodies are part of the Composites Leadership Forum, and it's our mission is to join all these bits together to get one common strategy, and of course help to attract funding from government. So the next slide, please. Actually, if you could step through all of these, I'll talk to the whole picture, the whole screen in one. But there we go. So what we have is a number of working groups. So down on the left-hand side there, you can see that we have representation from oil and gas, from aerospace, from defence, from marine, from wind and rail and automotive and in construction. So we have a number of groups which are industry-based, and then separately we have a number of working groups on technologies, workforce and people, sustainability, and that's something I'm going to return to a few times over the next few minutes. Regulations, codes and standards, and it's about pulling together a strategy which identifies where there is crossover between industry sectors and these important enablers in order that we can deliver the growth, develop appropriate technologies, and also cross-fertilize from one industry sector to another. So we're in the process of identifying common requirements and ultimately help the industry to put plans together to accelerate cross-sectoral knowledge and increase productivity in the supply chain. Thank you. Next slide, please. So fairly self-evident to all of us in the industry, the things that composites, and in particular carbon fibre, of course, the thing that what they offer is the ability to reduce weight for higher fuel efficiency and electric ranges. David was referring to that earlier on. Increased performance, very high strength to weight ratio, and in the top right hand of those two pictures you see a McLaren chassis, and it makes a huge difference to us. And I know that aerospace is making extensive use of composites now. Increase the life and reduce maintenance costs. I'll come back to that in a minute. And ease of assembly and enabling complex shapes. We can typically do more with composites than we can with some other materials. I'll just dwell for a little moment on the increased life and the reduced maintenance costs. That's a bit of a double-edged sword. Whilst clearly it's a benefit of composites, but it's also one of the problems that it brings is that composites don't degrade, and the reuse and the recycling of composites is becoming an increasingly important subject. Again, David referenced it earlier on, but I was speaking with Bays earlier on this week, and trying to reinvigorate the conversation about government investment in composites in the UK. And very strongly the message was coming back that the stumbling block for Bays is the extent to which we are working on recyclability and sustainability. And I think this is something that just this week has become more apparent to me. And if you look more broadly and listen to the news that we get over the television in the evenings, it's very clear that the green agenda is something that the government has hung its hat on for building the recovery from COVID. So this in particular, recyclability and sustainability, is something in particular that we will need to increase attention on. Thank you. Next slide. So back in 2015, the Composites Leadership Forum, I think, helped to put together a view of what the future markets could look like and the size of the potential for market growth. So this survey is 5 years old now, and the world has moved on. What you can see from this particular chart is that back in 2015, aerospace was anticipating something like a 10-fold growth to 3.35 billion. But just in 2018, 3 years later, identified that actually the potential for growth was more than double that. And you have there, in this particular picture, there was an anticipated growth in the whole industry of something like 5-fold over that 20-year period. one of the things that we've been doing is to encourage BEIS to either allow the CLF to manage a new survey of potential market growth, or better still, organise one themselves. And in fact, that's what's happened. So BEIS have pulled together funding from different organisations, and have in fact enlisted a market survey, an updated market survey, and that should have concluded by now. And it's only the COVID crisis that's delayed that. But we're anticipating seeing the results of that in September, October this year. And one of the things that I'm trying to do as chair of the CLF is to boil down what it is we do in the short term into some useful activities. So once we know how the market is expected to grow, then helping with the technology road mapping that's taking place, that I'll come to in a minute, match the technology roadmaps to where the biggest opportunities are. And as I mentioned a minute ago, and I'll reiterate now, I see it as being a useful purpose for us to be able to identify and focus on the areas of largest growth. That's helpful to industry because it identifies where to go doing the research, and it's helpful to government because government then have a strategy that they can go and sell to other countries for inward investment, and helps them to justify putting money into the industry. So very hopeful that first of all, that the new market survey will be completed in the not too distant future. And secondly, hopeful that we can use that then to encourage government to move some of its attention away from, in the materials sector, move some of its attention away from steel into composites. And it could be that composites actually becomes the largest materials sector in the UK in the years to come. Thank you. So for us to focus our investment, it's important in all of the industries to identify what are the key barriers and technical challenges that we need to overcome. So an example of that would be in aerospace. Investment is obviously a big barrier. Over a 3 to 6 year period, long-term investment is required to de-risk entry and development of new products. So that would be a reason for government to invest. Material systems, composite material formats and resin systems designed to meet specifications at aircraft level. So there is an awful lot that needs to be invested in, but to know where to invest, we need to know what the key barriers are. Technical barriers, not just technical barriers, but probably skills in this sector probably don't exist to the extent that we need them to for the future, and so that needs development. Recyclability I've spoken to, and then lack of standards. This is the other subject that we spoke about with BEIS earlier on this week. Particularly in construction, there is a recognition now that work needs to go into creating standards because of the way in which the construction industry operates and its fragmented structure. So the response to those key barriers. Moving on to the next slide, please. So, and could you click again to bring up the titles? Thank you. So what are we doing specifically? Following this speech, Enrique is going to talk in more detail about the technology roadmap. And I'll leave it for him to do that. So we have, in the Composites Leadership Forum, we have structured a part of the work to work with NCC on the technology roadmap. And then we also have working groups on technologies specifically, obviously, from the technology roadmap, but also working groups on workforce training and development, sustainability I've mentioned, and regulations, codes and standards. So we've structured ourselves to support activities in these areas such that the jigsaw comes together and makes sense strategically. So next slide, please. Very, very simply, the whole point about the technology roadmap is to identify technologies that respond to the barriers that we were referring to a moment ago. And down the left-hand side there, you see some of the technologies that are being considered, but not all technologies are relevant to all sectors. And you can see the little blue bars there indicate where some technologies are relevant to one industry and not the other. Now, structuring it in this way is very attractive to government, because if, for example, they want to invest in something, just simply picking the obvious one from here, lightweighting, if they were to invest in lightweighting, they know that they're then affecting all 6 of those industry sectors. And we need to focus the development activities, or at least focus government funding into areas where there's the biggest bang for the buck and the cross-sectoral message. So again, I won't talk any more about that because I'm sure Enrique will pick this up in more detail later on. Next slide, please. So the key targets and actions. We need to get the market technology study completed. It says here by the summer. I believe it is nearly complete, but I don't expect we'll see that until perhaps the early autumn. The roadmap needs ever-increasing development. I know that Enrique has managed with many of you quite a lot of progress on that over recent months, and certainly since the beginning of the year. We then need to match the technology roadmap with the market opportunities that are identified in the market study, and then specifically identify funded programs instrumental to what we're calling the grand challenge, which pulls together all of the different activities and one big funding activity for government and industry to agree on an integrated funding strategy. And mindful of time, one last slide, I think, please. So I'm not going to dwell on this. I felt that it might be necessary to talk specifically about the COVID-19 recovery, but David's covered that in much more detail, and there is a risk here that I'll just repeat what he was saying. So with that, I've seen a few questions come in, but I haven't been able to read them and talk and read the slides at the same time. So Sue.
Yes, thank you, Ken. I'll pick up. So yes, the questions have been coming in through the chat, which is fine. But if we can stick to using the Q&A and the chat just for anything you guys want to speak about amongst yourselves, then that would be great. Okay, I'll take the question that's come in through the Q&A. Okay. It's a chicken and egg question, it says, but and it goes to David and Ken. Do you see a tipping point for when composites materials will become more affordable for mass production use, for example, in family cars? There seems a reluctance from automobile OEMs, and they seem to be concentrating more on lightweighting using traditional steels and aluminium. Everything composite is more expensive than what it's supposed to be replacing, despite the requirements of the green agenda. So what's the answer?
David, can I pick that up? And I'll perhaps half put my McLaren hat on here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we in McLaren we've been doing some funded work with in Sheffield in our Composites Technology Centre, which is aimed at increasing the speed, reducing the waste of manufacturing preforms, and it's proved to be very successful. And of course, the route to getting more composites in mainstream vehicles is to reduce the cost and increase the speed of production. One of the downsides from manufacturing composites is it's slow and it's labor intensive and it's expensive, and it generates waste using the more traditional methods. So if coming back to a strategy with government, if we can raise the level of the conversation up to a strategic level that will attract government funding at a macro level, we know that there are manufacturing technologies out there that are worth developing, that will get us heading towards using composites in more mainstream products.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ken. Okay, we've not had any other questions come in, but again, if you think of anything as the afternoon progresses, please do raise them, and we can either take them at the time or pass them on to the speaker afterwards.
Can I just say, Sue, on that point, I mean, I'm no expert on the automotive sector and the cost competitiveness of composites, but I think we are seeing two things. One is the shift to electrification may require more lightweighting, and that might be a driver in itself from a composites perspective. But what I'm definitely seeing and hearing on a regular basis is companies who pre-COVID-19 weren't considering investment in automation and digitalization now are. And that might mean that we change business models, we change supply chains, and we change technologies.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, thank you very much both. Thank you, Ken. We spoke earlier about collaborative working, and Ken's obviously mentioned it as well during his presentation. I'd like to now introduce Enrique Garcia, Chief Technology Officer at the National Composites Centre and also Chair of the CLF Technology Working Group. And he's going to take us through how we can actually do this in practice. So Enrique, over to you.
Thank you, Sue, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. So following on Ken's presentation, I would like to give you a little bit more detail about the work that all the groups at the CLF have been doing over the last year to update the CLF strategy that we published in 2016, and also how that has crystallized in a clear ask to help the development of a competitive but collaborative UK supply chain to cover the needs of the different sectors in composites. So this slide Ken has already shown, but I wanted to explain a little bit more the work that we have been doing. So all of the different industry groups or the sector groups have been working on identifying the key challenges for their specific sectors. And working with these groups, what we at the Technology Working Group have been doing is gathering all of that and updating the information. So our work has been to identify the technology needs for each sector and then match that with the developments coming from academia and research centers like the NCC and the rest of the heavy manufacturing catapult, but also from TWI, MPL, and etc. So all the industrial groups have been doing quite a lot of work on the development of their own technology roadmaps, collaborating quite closely with the sector's funding bodies and the industrial associations. So what you see there is the example in aerospace. So I'm not going to get into the details, but as you can see in this roadmap, which was developed in conjunction with the Aerospace Technology Institute, the roadmap is really comprehensive, and it provides a set of information covering future platforms, the system and subsystems and the products needed, and what technologies will be needed to deliver those products. Automotive did something quite similar, working in conjunction with the APC. And they focus on the next automotive platforms. And construction infrastructure, for example, did the exact same thing with a very specific focus on identifying the barriers for composites and the development that was needed in the sector. So similar work has been done and performed by the other sectors too. So at the Technology Working Group, again, what we have done is just gather all that information, and quite soon it was really, really clear that there's a lot of commonality, a lot of common challenges. So what you see in this slide, it's a list, and what the table shows is the needs of the different industrial sectors across the different topics. Sorry. What you see is a lot of commonality, basically. So all of these things that you can see in the table were identified in more than one sector. And what we have done is essentially identify all the major topics and then cluster them in several major themes, if you will. So things like sustainability, that has already been mentioned twice, and is going to be critical for a number of sectors. Digital and high-value design, new materials, regulations and standards, extremely critical in more than one sector, actually. Tooling for composites, also very, very common, and it appeared in pretty much all of the different sectors. So there's quite a lot of information behind this table. And I'm not going to go through all of them. Of course, I'll be happy to just have follow-on questions or to have individual discussions afterwards. But I'm not going to try to cover all of this because this is way too much detail. But as you can see, there are many shared challenges across sectors. And Ken has already shown a version of this slide. I'm going to try to explain a little bit more what we have done there. But basically, what the table shows is that the needs of the different sectors across the technology topics is quite important. So I have included some of the key sectors, not all of those, but we have information for all of the different sectors that are currently or considering using composites. And basically, what this is showing is that there are very clear common technology development needs in multiple sectors. Of course, what we see is that sustainability means different things for different sectors, and possibly the specific solutions that will come on the rows, let's say. So for sustainability, the solutions for aerospace are going to be significantly different than from construction. But the common threads are very clearly identified. So we believe that this is a very clear opportunity to develop a really strong cross-sector supply chain in the UK. And there is massive potential, both thinking about the internal market, but also for export. So, however, something that was also quite clearly identified during the conversations with the industrial working groups and also with industrialists that are not participating in those groups is that the current funding mechanisms, mainly focused on open competitions, make it really, really difficult to be strategic in the development of solutions for most of the sectors. And this is particularly true when there is not an ATI or an APC supporting some of the sectors. So this makes quite difficult for some companies to convince their own shareholders to actually invest in the development of new solutions that might contribute to different sectors. So for all those reasons, this is why the CLF is actually proposing the creation of the Grand Challenge Hub that Ken mentioned. So I'm going to try to explain a little bit more what we think would be the right way of approaching the Grand Challenge. So what we want to create is a Grand Challenge Hub that looks strategically at the development of the UK supply chain in the key fundamental technologies that are going to be important across sectors. And those are the ones that we have identified in the last slide. So the hub will actually host all the information about the capabilities of the UK companies that are relevant to composites. The UK companies are involved, and also the intention of the hub is to actually audit those capabilities. So make sure that whatever is introduced in the database, let's say, is going to be assessed and confirmed. What we intend to do also is to provide the tools to give the supply chain the right level of visibility. So we want those companies that are generating these new solutions to have the right visibility, both in terms of promoting networking between those companies and the OEMs and the tier ones in the different sectors, but also in terms of making a wide dissemination of the newly developed capabilities. So whatever they develop, they need to make sure that this is actually quite visible. There's a really critical dissemination activity around the workforce development that Ken already mentioned, and this will also be driven by the hub. So in parallel to all of those activities around making sure that the UK companies have the right visibility and that everyone understands what the real capabilities of those companies are, what we're proposing is to have two different levels of programs. On the one hand, the fast-fail projects will focus on the delivery of technology solutions. And then at the next level up, larger challenge programs for specific sectors that will feed on the technologies developed in those fast-fail projects. So for the fast-fail projects, the proposal is to have specific funding calls so that we can have a strategic approach. And what we really intend doing this is avoiding as much as possible leaving technology gaps in key areas. So the proposed approach is to some extent to replicate the Fit for Nuclear program that has been really successful in that particular sector. So what we intend to do is to have something similar for the different sectors and cross-sector. The selection of the challenges will be driven by major industrial players, and this is really important to make sure that the technologies are not just technology development for the sake of technology development. What we really need is technologies that really answer industrial requirements. And with this in mind, this pass-fail program will basically focus on the development of new technologies with very clear end applications, and ideally on multiple sectors. As I said, feeding from those technologies successfully developed in the pass-fail projects, a series of challenge programs will be led by the major companies and will work on the industrial application for the next generation of products. So certain sectors have specific funding bodies like ATI for civil aerospace or the APC for automotive. And when this is the case, the challenge programs, in our view, could be funded directly by these sector funding bodies. But however, for other sectors, it is significantly more difficult to get funding. And the proposal will be for the Grand Challenge to actually have money ring-fenced to make sure that the technology is applied and that the right competitive products are developed, specifically for those sectors. This is just a simple slide trying to show schematically the proposal for the hub. So as I mentioned, the proposal is to develop cross-sector technologies, such as advanced joining, for example, or low-cost structural health monitoring, to name just two, at that fast-fail project level, which you can see below. And then those technologies will actually then be applied into real industrial products at the challenge programs, which are mainly going to be sector-based programs. We think that the Grand Challenge will create an immense opportunity to develop a resilient and highly competitive and highly collaborative UK composite supply chain in the key sectors. But one of the things that we have also identified is that we need to act as soon as possible. That was it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm not really sure if we have a lot of time for questions, but yeah, if we don't, just shoot me an email.
Okay, thank you very much, Enrique. And I think it's what's really exciting to see through this sort of work is the different industries coming together to solve common problems rather than us all going off and doing our own thing and ending up duplicating effort. I should also say that the hub will actually build on what already exists within the Composites UK hub. It's not that we're going to be duplicating what's there, but actually extending that. Yeah, so that it performs a much bigger role than it currently does. So that's really exciting as well. There's a couple of questions come in. The first one from Nigel, I'm going to leave for James later on, because that's all about whole life costing and making it more affordable for infrastructure projects and procuring, that sort of thing. So James, if you can have a look in the questions and have a think about how we might answer that one later. But Ben Wilson has come up with a question that's often asked by several of our members. So a lot of the time we talk about future markets and growth or new ways of doing things. But if a process and product is commercially viable and works, so in effect it is what it is, how do we encourage more manufacturing and business coming back to the UK in general GRP moulding, or at minimum securing current work so that it doesn't go overseas?
That's a really good question. I would say that, well, in order to make a competitive and collaborative supply chain, R&D and making sure that you're really identifying what the selling points are to actually bring it back to the UK is going to be quite key. So what I would encourage is well, to come to the Composites UK and certainly the CLF with that proposal, and really we can take a look at what the best possible approach would be.
Yeah,
so can I have an input?
Yeah, of course, David.
I think competitiveness and productivity is going to be hugely important for UK suppliers through 2020 and 2021. I would like to see the government investing some money in organisations like Enrique's to do more short-term activity to help these companies improve their competitiveness. I think Ben's right. You know, we've got to retain the work that we've got, and the way to do that is be as competitive as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, in the interest of time, we'll leave it there. Steve, Barbara, I don't think we know when the hub will go live in terms of the updated version, but keep an eye on emails coming out from Composites UK, and you'll you'll be in the loop and be the first to know. So thank you very much, Enrique. In the next part of the conference, we're going to focus on the 3 key sectors that we've touched on already, where composites can make a significant difference. Automotive, where lightweight, sustainability, but more importantly, high volume manufacture is critical. Construction, a sector that has to change its ways of working to deliver demand, moving towards modern methods of construction, designed for manufacture and assembly, and off-site construction. And this in turn offers huge opportunities for composites. And rail infrastructure, a sector where huge investment has and continues to be made. So 3 quite different sectors, but also there's common ties amongst them. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Alan Blanks of Ford Motor Company, who's going to look at the automotive sector. Alan, over to you.
Hi Sue, thanks very much. Some really good presentations so far. I think I'm going to build on those and hopefully answer one of the questions that came out earlier on. So as Sue said, my name's Alan Banks. I am the supervisor for the lightweighting department in UK innovations at Ford. I just want to give you a flavour of the kind of things that we are looking at and the kind of projects that we've done on composites in the past, just to give you a flavour of what's going on. And then the end of this, and I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides quite quickly. The end of it, I've actually got a plea to everybody on this call. So if you could really pay attention to that last bit, because I really need your help. So the issue that we have, and I've called this presentation "The Right Material at the Right Place," is because there's a perception within engineering and certainly within Ford that sort of composite materials are unbelievably expensive. The supply chain and infrastructure are just kind of prohibitive. They're just not there. Part design, the validation, the CAE, and how we correlate all of those is very difficult. The processing time to get parts into production doesn't necessarily suit mass production. And even if we did have them, how do we fit them onto existing facilities in a plant that's primarily set up for welding? There are aspects regarding the durability and longevity of the parts, although clearly we understand, well, we did believe we understand all of the strength requirements that we get for it. Then there's the insurance impacts, the cost of ownership for our customers. If a vehicle is in its 8th year of life and it has an accident and a composite part needs replacing, potentially that's going to write the vehicle off. So there could be insurance impacts for it as well. As the previous speakers have said, we have issues with recycling, disassembly and reuse, bearing in mind that the automotive sector is the only one that has end-of-life vehicle directives forced upon it. We're the only industry that actually has to take account of those because we're liable for them. And there's a difference of opinion in life cycle analysis where CO2 break-even points are. As an automotive manufacturer, I could say I'm going to produce a BEV vehicle and then just pat myself on the back and walk away. But that does me no good if the amount of CO2 that we've produced offshore or even in the manufacture of the parts in the UK far exceeds the amount of CO2 that the vehicle will even produce in its lifetime. However, having said that, there are opportunities that the whole industry can do. So yes, in the short term, sort of composite materials are probably prohibitive, but hybrid materials can be done at a much lower cost. We as an OEM and our tier ones often have initial design considerations and we collaborate a lot so that we can overcome some of these challenges. We have full industry collaboration, which should be done, frankly, between ourselves, aerospace, the rail, the wind farm industry and everybody else to actually get some advanced CAE methodologies in place. We all have the same problem, so we all need to fix them together. Obviously, if you have a composite component, you can reduce your part count. You don't have to rely on a very substantial bill of material. If you design the part right, you can put them into existing facilities. You don't necessarily have to rip them all up. The durability strength opportunities lie with hybrid technology, and I think I'll go over some of that in a minute. Clearly, if you have composite parts on a vehicle, and this leads to when autonomy becomes really key for us, you can put, you can can't even say that, you can embed sensors in the components as part of the manufacturer to help out with the requirements for durability. The longevity of the parts means that, okay, your vehicle is now scrapped, but you can take the high value parts off and you can use that for service. So if a vehicle is off the road for any given reason and there's a vehicle being scrapped, and you can take the high value parts off, similar to they do with aircraft scrapping. So in short, it's putting the right material in the right place. And I'm going to very, very quickly go over some examples of projects that we've done with Innovate UK. So the first project I did was called Class. This is a rear suspension member for a Focus RS vehicle. It's the part that holds the wheel onto the body. The scope of this was that we wanted to make that part mass producible. We wanted to, and mass produce for a Focus RS is around 25 vehicles a year. That meant a cycle time of sub 5 minutes for the part. We wanted to get 50% of the weight out of that whilst overcoming all the strength, the durability and stiffness targets that come with it. So that tie blade, as I said, we wanted to get 50% weight out of that, which the red part that you can see on the screen that goes from the very top to the very end, that's a preformed pre-preg. We weren't expecting to use preformed pre-preg at the time, hence the cost for this went astronomical. We have carbon fibre SMC, where we need all of the sort of geometric elements, and we have a steel insert, which is over-moulded by the SMC. So when the part is finished, you physically can't see that part. That all goes into a compression mould. So that the manufacturing of this, we put the steel inside the upper platen of the vehicle that's held by, of the tool, that's held by a magnet. The SMC charges are pre-placed into the steel insert. We lay the preformed pre-preg in the bottom platen. The mould comes together, the SMC flows, over moulds the steel, and 5 minutes later, the part pops out. That tool is controlled to 150 degrees and 100 bar to ensure we always get good mould consistency. I won't go through this, but we obviously did a full suite of correlation tests, and as you can see, this is just one test. This is the buckling test that we do, and our CAE and rig test showed really, really good correlation, and all of our tests were within 6% of their targets. So our conclusions were we could clearly meet the requirements. We've got the 50% weight save that we had. We've got really good CAE optimization, which was developed to accurately predict our data. We've got a one-time compression mould with 2 different types of carbon fibre and steel insert, and the testing correlation with the CAE worked really well. This is the part as it's assembled to the rear suspension. I won't go over this very quickly in the interest of time, but you can see on the bottom right-hand picture, you can see the composite part on the right with the steel part on the left of that. And this final picture on this project is a shameless piece of self-publicity. This project was the winner of the 2018 JEC Award for Automotive Application Innovation. The second project I want to briefly talk about is one we've got currently going. This project isn't finished yet, but it's got about just under a year to run. But this is called Chassis, and it's a very similar type of vein, in as much as when we started Class, it wasn't supposed to be a hybrid of materials. It was supposed to be entirely carbon fibre. When we went through the project, it quickly became clear that wasn't going to be possible, but it kind of opened our eyes to, okay, maybe hybrid of materials isn't the worst thing. So this project is all about commercial vehicles this time. So all of the parts you can see here are from a transit van, and that's my background, is commercial vehicles. So we've got the front suspension, subframe, the lower control arm, and the rear dead beam axle for front wheel drive units. Pretty much again, and we need a cycle time of under 5 minutes to support the full commercial vehicle volume, but commercial vehicle volume now, we're talking 500,000 units a year, so significant volume. Again, our cycle times are under 5 minutes to meet that volume. We're looking for a 40% weight reduction across all of those parts with the same kind of challenges for the technical team. So the front subframe, we're looking at around 38% weight reduction, and we have a pre-preg upper and lower pressing with an aluminium front cross member, an SMC rear panel, some aluminium side rails, and some structural adhesive bonding to hold it all together with good integrity. The lower control arm that we have is going to be an injection molded with over molded content. So we have the purple part you can see on the left-hand side of that is a steel insert that holds the ball joint taper. So that's over molded by the PA6 substrate. And we have a couple of pre-preg UD patches along the tyre clearance zone and what we call the Tokyo Bay area around the leading edge that are over molded in the injection molding tool. So the part is injection molded. Sorry, I missed the slide there. So the rear dead beam, we're looking at quite a significant weight saving with this, 53%. This is going to be a protruded beam. We're going to have an aluminium extrusion at either ends that reacts the jounce bumpers for impact harshness. It's got the spring seats on there, as well as the wheel bearing carriers. Again, all of that is going to be structurally adhered to part integrity. So the manufacturing of all of this, so on the front cross member, as I said, we have an upper and lower panels made of pre-preg. They're going to be formed in a single tool, despite the fact that they're different thicknesses, by our colleagues at WMG. The compression moulding of the SMC for the back panel, we can do that without pre-forming. We're going to sand cast the aluminium side rails, but in production they will probably be die cast. And the front cross member will be an aluminium extrusion. So the front lower control arm, as I said, is going to be an injection mould with all of the pre-preg strips already loaded in the tool, along with the steel forging. Bushings are going to have to be pressed into the part as they normally would be to the steel part in serial production. The rear dead beam, as I said, is going to be protruded. We're still looking at the materials for that, despite the fact that we're so close to starting the tool. We think we know where we are. There is IP on this, so I can't give you too many details just yet, as the project isn't finished. And as I said, we've got some aluminium extrusions for the spring seats, the jounce bumper, reaction points, and the wheel bearing attachments. All of these parts are going to be tested by our partner, which is Gestamp in this case, but our tier 1 supplier, who thankfully make the production parts out which are fabricated. So they can go on exactly the same test beds, they'll use exactly the same actuators, we know the loads, we can do back-to-back testing. All of the requirements need to be met, so we don't see any real issues on here. Our CAE is looking good, and we're hoping that by the end of 2020 we'll have some parts that we can go and test. So the conclusions for this, and we believe we're going to meet the sub 5-minute cycle time for all of the components. We don't see any real reasons why we shouldn't do. The full annual production of vehicles is easily achievable off the tools that we'll have. We're looking at a weight reduction of 40% average compared to all of those parts. And just to put some meat on the bones with that, 40% for those components is getting on for 30 kilos. So it's not insignificant. We've obviously got the innovative CAE optimization developed to accurately predict our criteria for the design. The manufacturing simulations do predict stable parts. The mold flow analysis that we've done for the lower control arm, we believe is going to be one of the most critical ones, because where the weld lines are and where the flow lines run are really, really dependent on the part stresses, and we can't afford to have any warpage as the part comes out of the mold. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. But our testing correlation with the CAE should confirm that. We were hit by COVID with people going in furlough, so the project is overrunning a little bit with the full approval of APC and IUK, obviously. So we'll be looking to produce parts at the end of 2020 for initial trials, beginning of 2021 now. Our costs are met in line with our cost per kilo weight saving target. Again, I can't really go into that just yet because the program is still going. So my next slides, and apologies, my internet says it's unstable and it's taking its time to load up the screens. So I'm just going to beg the people on this call for some help. So we went through the class project that actually had a follow-up project called Epoch. I went through Chassis. There was a project called Light Join about joining dissimilar materials. And we've just started a project with APC as part of APC 15, which we were successful on, called eShadow, which is a continuation of all of those projects. But I honestly, from an OEM perspective, I don't know how we can continue to do this. And I need the industry to help me. So, as I said, composites are still perceived to be the domain of the supercar. We've got the McLaren F1, the LaFerrari, McLaren P1, and the Bugatti Chiron. And please, everyone from McLaren, close your ears at this part, that these are not supercars. This is a supercar, okay? And I know people are probably laughing right now, but let me put some meat on the bones of that. This is the fastest vehicle in the world. It doesn't matter what you're driving, there's one of these in your rearview mirror trying to get past. And just so we're very clear, by the way, this one is my daily drive. It carries 2 tons of payload. It's comfortable, trust me, it's practical, it's inexpensive. It's actually quite stylish these days. It's mass produced, but it's too heavy. And the issue that I have is, from a commercial vehicle perspective, weight is everything, because with electrification comes extra weight, with autonomy comes extra weight. And what really, really hurts us in the commercial vehicle world is that we live and die by the amount of payload that we can carry. So the more this vehicle weighs, the less I put in the back. The less I put in the back, the less I can sell. And the ones I do sell, I have to sell for less just to get them out of the door. If I can get weight out of this vehicle at scale and at cost, then we effectively solve the world, because all the composites industry can start producing composite materials for me. I can go in and use them. More importantly, I can sell them, because the more payload I can put in one of these, the more I can charge for it. The more I can charge for it, the more profit we make, the more that fleets back into industry. So that's my plea to everyone. I think I'm bang on time. That's my last slide. If there are any questions, by all means ask it at the end of this, or by all means send me an email as a follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, especially the last two slides. I was one of those chuckling, but you have shown me those before, so I was slightly prepared. Yeah, I think Alan's covered some really key points there. And it is about the industry responding to the needs of the OEM. So if you would like to get involved with what Alan and Ford are doing, please, his contact details were on the screen a moment ago. If you didn't manage to grab them, you'll get a copy of the slides anyway, but if you'd like to be introduced to him, then please drop us a line at Composites UK and we'll make that introduction. The question that's come in is actually during that presentation is more geared towards Enrique, so I'll take a photo of that and pass it on to you. Oh, we've got a question from Simon Brearley. We'll just take this one. I think we've just got a couple of minutes. What effect has the pandemic had on commercial vehicle production, in particular Ford's approach to the composites challenge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Our plant was in Turkey that makes Transit in Europe was closed down, exactly the same as our plant in commercial in Kansas City in the US. Oddly, when the plant went back, it was one of the first ones to go back in Ford, believe it or not. We actually started making more Transits we've ever made before. I mean, I live in a tiny road with 5 houses on it, and we must get 40 vans a day come down our road doing home deliveries. There's been a significant shift into home delivery, which has had a really, really positive impact on commercial vehicles. So yeah, it's actually been a real boon for us, which is why I strongly believe that the future of composite materials is in commercials, because the amount of commercials that come down our road and that you see on the road with regard to supermarket deliveries that went through the roof and Amazon deliveries that went through the roof, the market's there. And the more efficient the vehicles are, there's no doubt about it, the more efficient we can be as an industry. So definitely, that's a real big help for us.
Sorry, muted myself. Our own Stella Job has asked a question, and I think it's important that we ask this one because it's one that's asked a lot, Alan. It's why have we seen so little in high volume automotive of optimally designed glass fibre composites? Carbon fibre is great, but it's expensive. Most of the glass fibre composites used are in low value, low volume interiors, such as chopped glass, polyurethanes, but you can get higher performance. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, one of the things that I've started to look at now in my new role, which incidentally I've only been in for about 8 months, is exactly that. The chassis project I went over, we're going to use primarily glass in it. We found we just don't need to go to carbon. But I think that's everybody's perception. When you talk composite materials, then their brains immediately jump to carbon. And that's one of the things, certainly from a Ford perspective, I'm trying to knock over. And I don't know if Ford are unique in that assumption and that perspective. But yeah, I can absolutely, completely agree with you. If we can get the volume manufacturing out of it, then yes, glass, for me, that's the holy grail of materials, especially if we can do it with thermo resins. Brilliant,
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Alan. In the interest of time, we'll move on. So now we're moving on to construction. A sector that is, I'm sure if you've seen any of the press this week, is the focus of the government's new Build, Build, Build campaign, which David touched on earlier. So I'd like to introduce James Henderson, who's Technical Authority at Atkins and chairs the CLF Construction Group, and look at the challenges and opportunities within this sector. So James, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Sue. Thank you for that. Good afternoon, all. As Sue said, my name is James Henderson. I work with Atkins, and anybody who knows Atkins, we are one of the major players in the construction industry, not just in the UK, but on a worldwide basis. I've been a civil and structural engineer now, practicing for over 25 years, and probably in the last 10 to 15 years, I've seen a change, and I've moved more into the kind of composite sector, starting out really in a structural strengthening point of view. But that's moved now into, entirely, 100% structures made from composites. So today I want to just talk through you about the construction market. Obviously, I'm going to give you a general overview of the market, have a little chat about what the COVID has meant for us, and really then jump on to some of the actions that we have been looking at in the CLF construction group that I chair. So just to kind of kick off and give you a little bit of a flavor of what the construction sector is. Now, if we just look at the 2018 figures, construction alone accounts for 8% of the GDP, our gross domestic product, accounting for around about 10% of all employment in the UK. Now, those are actually huge figures. And earlier on today, we've obviously talked about aero and auto being the major industries that are using composites, but the construction industry is almost 4 times the combined outputs of both of those industries. It's, it is a significant sector, and it is one that, we probably aren't getting as much inroads as potentially is available there. So there's a lot of growth potential for us in this market, and certainly in the advanced materials market. And it's definitely worth saying that within the UK, we do have a reputation for excellence in construction. We deliver mega projects, not just major projects, all around the world. And as has already been said today, this does create the foundations for UK growth. And I think it's really important to, understand that, because construction has always been seen as the animal for growth for the UK. When we've had times of financial hardship, infrastructure spend has always been seen as the way to move forward. Now, nobody's mentioned the B word yet. A lot of what we've been doing to date has looked at Brexit, has looked at the environment that we would be going into, and ensuring that we transform our industry to be one of the best industries out there, and to really get the productivity that we are looking for. But obviously things have changed quite significantly. What we have seen, obviously everybody's totally familiar now with the industrial strategy and how we can increase the productivity of the UK. Now, this was very much something that's been driven from this new dawn that we were supposed to be seeing with Brexit coming, and giving the UK that ability to transform itself. But some interesting aspects in the industrial strategy relates to the foundations of productivity that they're looking for. And as you can see there, infrastructure is straight in the middle of there. It is always seen as one of the significant kind of programs, or there's a significant national pipeline out there of mega projects that are there to improve our infrastructure, but also improve growth, because these jobs or rather these schemes, they may be multi-billion-pound schemes, but a lot of that money that's spent comes back to the individual from a staff cost point of view, or it goes to SMEs from a materials and products point of view. So all of that money does filter through. It's not just a single spend and everybody looking at HS2, which is, had mixed reviews in the past. A lot of that money is actually going to UK citizens. You will be the ones building it. But we've had a whole host of some really big projects going in the last couple of years, and they will continue to go forward in future years. And it's certainly something that's already been touched on of the build, and I'll come to that in a sec. But let's just look at what COVID has done to us. Now, this is probably not too dissimilar to all of the markets out there. But as you can see in that bottom graph, we've had a steady progress over the last couple of years. So some down spots, some high spots. But, at the end of 2019 on the graph, you can see a big downturn. Now, totally understandable that is, the impact of COVID, everybody working from home, sites being shut down. It's not surprising to see that downturn. But there are unique parts of our industries that have seen upturns. A lot of the the technical consultancy work from an infrastructure point of view has seen increases in the workloads that are coming out. But I think the most important thing that we've just touched on is what we've seen as the pledge for investment. We are going to build our way out of the downturn that we've seen as a result of the coronavirus. So really, this is here to stimulate growth. Now, I'm not sure how much of this time is, money that's already been pledged, or it's new money. But whichever way you look at it, we do have a significant pipeline of work that is going to occur in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's certainly worth looking at that and trying to understand that, because I think one of the key things we've seen today is that aero and auto are struggling. The industries have been severely hit, and it will take time for them to get back to where they were pre-COVID. But this gives an opportunity for construction because the size of the market, if we could only get a small increase in the volume of material that we put into the construction sector, it would really permit a lot of diversification from our other SMEs or our other major tier ones to also do some other work outside of potentially aero and auto. The skills are there, but it's just a matter of getting them transferred sideways. But the key thing for us really is infrastructure is this catalyst for growth that is seen. Money will be spent here, and we will, be able to move forward from a financial point of view to really get the growth that we have been looking for as a nation. Now, just taking this from the Construction Leadership Council, they've broken down their roadmap to recovery into 3 separate stages. So we've already seen something similar to this. Very much a restart phase, a reset phase, and a reinvent phase. Now I'll just turn over onto the next series and set of slides. Obviously, restart, we're pretty much through this now, and we're pushing into the reset phase. So, our programs and projects have kicked back off. Some didn't stop, some did carry on. We still do have this disruption, but now we are looking at resetting and recreating the pipeline, increasing our productivity throughout the industry. And then finally, further on down the line, 12 months plus, we are looking at the reinvent position. So this is going into the transformation, the value propositions, the partnerships. This is very much back to square one, back to where we were pre-COVID. When we talk about transformation, there's a huge program at the moment, Transforming Construction, and that is looking at how we digitize the industry and there's a number of other ones then. Net zero was one that has also been mentioned, and the sustainability push. So there's some really big programs of work going on there, and there's certainly that focus of moving forward into creating this industry and obviously increasing the growth for composites in the construction sector. So obviously, we talked earlier on about there being that 5-year plan for aero and auto. And as I've just mentioned here, it's a lot shorter here in construction. We are looking at, taking these programs forward straight away. But composites does have its own challenges in there. And there's a whole host of blockers, which I'll come on to next when we start looking at the type of work that we've been doing in the CLF construction group. So the construction group that we have is a relatively newly formed group, very much a group of asset owners and asset stakeholders and certainly interested parties. And in there you can see your Highways England, Network Rails, UKRI, BSI. But there's a very good core group now that we've now established. To date, this year we've had 3 meetings to date, 2 formal meetings, and obviously with COVID coming in, 1 or 2 remote meetings as well, virtual meetings. So very much a strategic group with some wide attendance and many asset stakeholders in there. So just looking at the aims of the group and how the group fits into the overall picture of the CLF. CLF construction feeds into the main CLF group, and we have a whole host of supply chain groups then that will feed into the CLF construction group. Now, some of them will come from the rail background, some of them come from the Composites UK construction group that is there. But fundamentally, the aims of this group really are to own the strategy and roadmap, to really promote composites, to aid that technology transfer that we are looking at, and also to map the supply chain, identify our weaknesses and try to resolve them. If we go forward then, so many of you may have heard and been involved, and if you were involved, thank you very much, in the road mapping exercise that was undertaken last year. So that's now complete, and we're very much moving into the action planning phase of that. Now, the road mapping gave us some key areas where there were some significant needs and some significant drivers and challenges, and a lot of them are the ones that you see in the bottom of this diagram. So the economics of composites, the risks associated with lack of standards, circular economy and sustainability, durability was one, end user confidence is another one. We don't have the history that we do of, let's say, steel and concrete. FST requirements, very much something that's been high on the agenda. And obviously, there are the other aspects of skills, education, supply and demand. So all of these areas now, we're looking at developing actions and working forward to try to address what the blockers may be. So one of the areas, and I've got to give a big thank you to Neil Appleton from the NCC, who set up and hosted a whole host of Trello boards. So these boards are there to really help us to coordinate some of these activities. So as I mentioned to you a minute ago, economics was one of the first actions. So you can see on one side, we've got the key blockers of competitiveness, economic viability, and must be cost effective. Very much the kind of aspects that we've already talked about. And then we've broken these down into a whole host of actions, from top level actions, some just ownerless actions, actions that are in progress that we are dealing with, and completed actions. So we're trying to, change the environment that we've got there and to plug these gaps and feed this back in. So as we continue along on this journey, some of the key questions that are being asked, we are trying to answer. And I think it's perfect time really to jump into the question that Nigel Keane posed earlier, and I'll read that out. Can a government procurement lead to require whole life cost business cases make the difference to apparent affordability of composites, especially infrastructure. So what we're asking now is procurement and whole life cost. And as you can see, one of the top level actions we have there, whole life procurement is essential. That is one of the things that we have been pushing. It is something that has also appeared in the industrial strategy and filtered in there. It is, you see wording of procuring for whole life value. That is something that is essential, and we keep on pushing that because we are not comparing apples and pears together. We are comparing something that is quite different. You know, we cannot compare steel to a composite. You know, a steel would require repainting at regular intervals, whereas a composite may not require that. So we can't continue to purchase and make our decisions on initial cost. And that has been part of the construction industry for a long time. Initial cost is king. And this is one area that we are trying to talk to government, to lobby for change. And it's good to see that that has already been accepted as being one of the areas that they are looking to change in the industry. So we can only wait to see what comes from that and how they will actually develop and put whole life costing, for instance, into a procurement model. And I think it's also worth to say that sustainability is no different. We can create products that are much more sustainable than others, but they may be slightly more expensive. So where does the value come from sustainability? And that is something that also needs to be brought in, because one solution could be 40% more sustainable than another. But if it's 10% dearer, will it be selected? And does it fit into the lowest price procurement bracket that currently exists? You know, that is the blocker we will always have, and we always have to come across. So we do need the answers to these questions, and we do need to set the challenge to government about how we change procurement, how we make sure that we look at life cycle management of structures. Most structures are in existence for a minimum of 120 years. That is the design life for most pieces of infrastructure and buildings. So very interesting, and we have a whole host of Trello boards as we've got here that we are just using to kind of capture and record where we are on tackling these options. Okay, so let's just move on. So as I said earlier, we've got a whole host of boards with a number of actions, a number of live actions, and a number of closed actions. So we are particularly looking at those key areas that you can see there. And as already has been said by Enrique and others earlier, it's how we can connect these, because there's a whole host of work going on in the Rediscover program for the circular economy and sustainability. You know, we need to ensure that we can influence that program, and we can actually extract information on that program to pass down through our supply chain. So again, it's all about tying up many of these research programs, and the most successful research programs will be the ones that can have as many fingers in the pie as there is possible there. Okay, so just to summarize, again, another call to collaborate and share ideas. Don't ever be afraid of trying to, you know, explain the problems that you've got. Don't hide behind the IP that has perhaps been something that the manufacturing industry has very much been protective of for many years. If we are going to address these blockers and challenges, we have to do it as an industry, not as a single entity. The more players we can get together to support that, the better position we will get, and the better we would be able to lobby for funding and fundamentally shape some of the future funding programs to suit the requirement that we have in construction. It is different to the normal manufacturing industry purely because of the environment that we've just talked about of lowest price procurement, etc. Anyway, so really, just to summarize and to finish on that, we're in a position now, as I said earlier, where construction is going to be in a major growth position. We're going to see billions put towards some major construction projects all throughout the UK. And I would suggest that there are lots of opportunities for diversification in the next couple of years. And this will certainly, hopefully, help us fill some of the skills gaps that we've seen, and also help, level out the peaks and troughs that are seen in the other aero and auto sectors. So I'm just going to finish on that one, and I'll pop it back to you, Sue, for running with the questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, James. Unfortunately, I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to carry on, but there are a couple of questions in the Q&A facility. So I don't know if you want to go in during the next presentation and have a look at those and maybe pick them up and answer them. Similarly, for Alan and Enrique, there's a couple of questions that have popped up that are directly aimed at your presentation. So it would be worth having a look at those as well. But thank you very much, James. Yes, I totally support what you're saying. There's huge potential for composites in the construction sector. As I mentioned in the chat box, Composites UK and NCC, through CLF roadmap activities that James just presented, we're doing an awful lot of work in this area, and are engaging with the Transforming Construction team in the very, very near future. So watch this space for how you can get involved in that initiative. And certainly the construction sector group of Composites UK is one of the key delivery partners going forward for this. So we're going to move on now to rail infrastructure. Composites have found widespread application across the rail network, but to date are often seen not as a mainstream material like steel or concrete. So Jonathan Howard of Dura Composites Limited, and the driving force really behind the Upcry Group, looking at unlocking the potential for composites in rail infrastructure, will look at why this is and what's being done to address it. So Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Sue, and hello to everyone. As Sue mentioned, I'm Jonathan Howard. I'm the Business Development Manager for GRP Products for Dura Composites, but spent the last 3 years on the rail sector and growing this market for Dura, which is now the largest sector, which we've tripled in size in the last 3 years. And I would say since lockdown, if it wasn't for the rail sector, the picture for Dura would have been very different, because rail did continue with certain projects. Network Rail were able to centrally purchase materials for now and for future works coming up. And if it wasn't for that, the picture for Dura would have been very different. And obviously it's a benefit of the rail working in 5-year budget periods that budget is secured, but they're able to do certain work securely over the last 3 months. Just a little bit about Dura. We're a 24-year-old business based in sunny Clacton-on-Sea. GRP is our main product, but we also have wood plastic composites as part of our solutions. We work across multiple sectors, but as mentioned, rail is one of our largest. We're very proud to say that we've won 2 Queen's Awards, one this year for Enterprise Innovation, which was for our rail station platform. So very proud of what we achieved there. I know our vision because I guess the rail infrastructure challenge or challenges is basically our vision as well, which is to make composites mainstream. And it's also not just the rail sector, but across all sectors. But also to make composites materials the first and best choice in every scenario where they are suited. It's been touched on already that GRP isn't the best solution for every application, but our focus is that when it is considered the best material, that it's known about and it's used within those applications. So just to run through, I guess, a few key benefits which we show within the application of GRP in the rail sector. We demonstrate that it's easy to install, it's durable, and has very low maintenance. It also has its benefits across similar materials such as steel, and it has a variety of applications which you can see in the photos, such as open mesh walkways, raised walkways, hip covers, station platforms, footbridge treads. So it has a nice variety of applications which are, as I say, easy to install. And with that, in comparison, it also raises performance levels. And also we can address the design limitations. And with this, we've demonstrated time and time again that we're able to provide new and better solutions for these applications. And just covering off a few of the kind of key features, as mentioned before, time saving and due to it being low weight, reduces time on site, reduces the requirement for large, heavy equipment to install. It's durable. It's also can be repaired in situ. As we know, pound for pound, it's stronger in comparison to what's replacing, such as steel and wood and aluminium. Its appearance, in most applications, it doesn't need painting. And also, we were demonstrated with fire testing. It has a high level of fire resistance, and once in place, has pretty much near zero maintenance. But running through these points, it's also to consider what our main clients' focuses are. When I say our main clients, I talk about Network Rail, Transport for London, and also HS2. But if we consider Network Rail as one of the main focuses, as a company, their main approach is passenger first. And with this, they must consider to use materials which have minimal or little disruption to the passenger. Other key features are such as efficiency, cost savings, sustainability, and safety. And that's safety to the passenger, but also safety to the contractor who's installing the materials. So when you consider the application and features of GRP, it covers off many of the main focuses for our clients. And it's our job, and our job as an industry, to continue to let the client know and understand how we allow them to meet and achieve their goals. For Dura, we've got 4 key areas, but obviously there's much further applications. Station platforms and accessories, trackside solutions, maintenance, care depots, and then we have our structural beam sections where we create raised structural access platforms. But within these applications, our key challenge, and I guess our competition, is traditional materials. So wood, steel, and concrete. And really the biggest challenges we have is obviously how many years that they've been used, and how we understand those how to apply those materials, the standards which have been created around the applications over the many years, and also the education and knowledge within the industry, which ultimately means that they can use and build with confidence, even when they understand the limitations, or where they understand that it's not the best product for application, but because of the amount of many years it's been in use, it's the go-to product. And with that, that's a continuous challenge when we're trying to change and move to using composite materials. And it's the same again with concrete. So it's a similar challenge every single time when we're trying to change someone to move and to use composite materials. And this challenge we are overcoming, but as noted, as it was only 7 years ago that, for example, standards didn't enable for composites to be used. Existing standards were typically based, as I say, around traditional materials, which meant the test methods were not suited for the use of GRP. In most cases, we were being able to look at standards which were for over-engineered solutions. In some cases, we're asked to consider standards which didn't even exist, which also makes it very difficult. But the one big factor is when we consider the process that designer has to go through in all the stages, which if you squint, you might be able to read some of the words on there. But if you consider the stages in which a designer has to go through to get a product approved and installed on the network, trying to compete against traditional materials is difficult when they've got all the information at each individual stage. Effectively, as an industry, what we've done is we've leapfrogged this many years of information and provided a product to market. But what we're trying to do now is to backfill and provide all the information at each one of these points, so that it makes the life easier for the person who's proposing, designing and procuring or installing the product to know that it's the right solution. So a challenge for us is obviously we are challenging standards on a daily basis, and it's the only way in which we can get the materials to be used. And just kind of going through one particular project where we were looking at fire standards, and in particular for our station platform. So the process we went through was to engage with one of the trade bodies, RIA, to firstly understand how we can expand the use of GRP within this application. They enabled us and directed us to the correct fire experts to, I guess, understand the challenge and then what we need to demonstrate and the testing required. The one thing which we did was we involved the BRE and we requested for our materials to be tested, and we actually invited Network Rail as part of this process so they could see it being burnt, and quite surprising how easy it was to get someone down to watch something being burnt. But also, once we had the data, they enabled us to obviously consider it and put it against the different asset types. But also, having them on board meant that they could understand and see how the materials survive the test. The one thing which is now available to all of us, and the one thing which we've used to our advantage, is Network Rail and also Transport for London both have a standards challenge. Network Rail recently launched a new website for the standards challenge, which I'm able to share to everyone. And what this enables you to do is to challenge a standard either on its own or within an actual project. And this has been great for us because when we had the data demonstrating that we actually exceeded the standard for burn time for a station platform, it was one of the first things which we challenged. And actually now we've got composites included as one of the materials to be used as a station platform. Subsequently, since then, we've made changes to our platform and we've even improved on our original time. So it's just demonstrating that we're not only just meeting, we're far exceeding the standards in place for traditional materials. This is just a short demonstration of where we actually challenge a standard within a project. Traditionally, and for Transport for London, they apply a 20 kilonewton loading across all walkways, even if you're unable to get that loading within that area. So within this project, we challenged that standard and demonstrated the actual requirement for loading, and with that, we provided the test data to show that that actually a 10 kilonewton loading was more than applicable and safe to be used within that application, and that our composite slab walkway could more than meet and actually exceed that safety requirement. And from that, we actually proceeded and won the project where we delivered 420 meter walkways and various other applications across that project. The one thing which James raised earlier, and the one thing which we understand is that there's various reasons and barriers and blockers which are stopping the materials being used. And what we've created is two composite rail working groups, one run by the Rail Alliance and one which is run in collaboration with ourselves and Composites UK, which is called UpCry, or Unlocking the Power of Composites for Rail Infrastructure Improvements. The Rail Alliance Composite Working Group is focusing on how we can integrate the materials and make sure that they sit alongside other products being used. And that's when it comes to considering assessments for BREEAM or sequel, and also making sure the products themselves are rubber stamped and deemed safe and correct for use. Where the difference with UpCry is the first approach which we're tackled is considering all the grassroots barriers and blockers across design, procurement, construction, maintenance and demolition. In total, I think we raised around about 160 barriers and blockers, where we realised that the main ones to focus on were or is education and standards. And with that, obviously, the lack of knowledge and confidence of the use of materials in the market. So understanding that they're the main focus areas, or I guess the lowest hanging fruit, we're now working as a collaborative group, which you can see the number of members which have attended the meetings, but it is an open group where we want to invite more people to join, and with that provide support when tackling these barriers and blockers. But ultimately what our main focus is, now we understand what these are, it's now providing answers or solutions, or it's going back to Composites UK, NCC, CLF to understand how we can come together to provide the support needed to overcome these reasons why the materials are not being used. And I'm aware that there's various things happening at the moment where they're actually taking this information, and then with that hopefully being able to help overcome these I guess regular challenges or headaches which Dura hit every single day.
Jonathan, is 2 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll very quickly go through some of the applications which we've been able to proceed with, considering all the challenges which we have in front of us. So I mentioned Station Platform, which we won the Queen's Award for, but this is a product which we've designed to meet and be incredibly quick to install, but also can easily be maintained, but also deal with engaging issues years down the line. But the main focus is the time saving, which to install on site, and then the maintenance engaging of the product once it's installed. We've now recently focused on redesigning the steel substructure to maximise the span of our panels, but also to speed the install process of a product. And this has now been installed at Rob Royce in Scotland. We've considered safety measures such as fencing, coming up with a very quick to install modular system. We've got canopy covers which replace wood, which do not require painting, but also meet a BS 476 Part 7 Class 1 fire rating. Fully structural treads, which integrate every single requirement to be installed on the network, but also again meets Class 1 fire rating. This is the project mentioned before, where we delivered a 120 metre raised access walkway for maintenance of HVAC units, 420 metre raised access walkways for maintenance and cleaning. But to kind of finish, we're also now understanding where the products have been used for the last 15, 20 years. And with this, we're now redesigning those products to make them lighter, stronger, improving fire resistance, and with that making them cheaper. So the great thing is, by obviously growing within this market and with the money which we're able to reinvest back into R&D, we're now demonstrating that we can start to overcome the challenge of cost and actually make the product a lot more affordable but stronger within those applications. And the one thing which we're also focusing on is making sure that in terms of the support which we provide our clients and also data is better than those provided by the competition within other markets. So we're trying to make the lives a lot easier for the clients, and again removing another reason why to not use composite materials. So to finish on this slide, the future. Well, I hope from this, it's a snapshot of what Dura do, but there's far more applications and there's far more areas in which composites can be utilised across the network. With the standard challenge being there and the opportunities available, I hope with that, as a group, we'll be working together and collaborate together to come up with more solutions. And with Network Rail being a member of the NCC, we're able to demonstrate where the materials can be used, and with that, allow Network Rail to meet its targets. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. And that was a whistle-stop tour at the end. So if anyone's got any questions, they can perhaps come back to you afterwards. But thank you very much. I think you've actually answered the question that was raised during your presentation, which is all about changes within Network Rail to make it easier to get composites included into rail infrastructure. And I think certainly the experience that you and I have shared with them over the last few months with their involvement within UpCry and other initiatives and joining the NCC, they are really taking this seriously now and looking at new materials for across their network. So I'm hoping, like you say, that we're going to start seeing a step change in this going forward.
I agree, and also to note that the SBI recent grant funding, that one of the winners was a composite footbridge.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jonathan. And before I hand over to our chairman to wrap up the conference, I'd just like once again to thank all our speakers this afternoon for very interesting and informative insight into what lies ahead for the UK composite sector. I think we've got some challenges, but I think there's also huge opportunity out there. We've just got to work out how we go about and make the most of it. So Ben, I'd like to hand over to you now for your final thoughts.
Yes, afternoon everyone, and thanks to all the speakers and Sue for chairing this afternoon. Appreciate you taking that pressure off me during this time. I think, you know, it's interesting listening to it all, from all the challenges that we're going through, the number of opportunities that are there for the composite sector. And I think what David spoke about in the competitiveness and productivity, I think that's somewhere where, as Composites UK, we can support some SMEs. I know it's there where there was a question about, you know, sort of primes and tier ones helping smaller companies come through and get on board with some of that. I know from MPM's perspective, you know, we can look at some of the big grander things, which is maybe a little bit scary sometimes. So, you know, working in collaboration with people, there's some great companies out there that I think can get on board with some of these opportunities that we speak of. So looking at automotive, everybody thinks it's sort of a car crash at the minute, but you look at the commercial vehicle side, as was pointed out, which is booming. And to be honest, that's one of the opportunities that we've just taken on a contract around the home delivery vehicles. So there are opportunities out there. And I think, you know, another great example, the Ford against the supercars. You know, if you need to take a load somewhere, a supercar's not much good to you. So they've both got the place in the market, and as a GRP moulder within that, I think there's plenty of opportunity for the really high end stuff. But we need to remember some of the sort of the working stuff and some things that work that we need to ensure that secure in manufacturing in this country. So thanks very much to all the speakers, and hope everybody has enjoyed it this afternoon and taken a few nuggets of information away. Thank you. Thanks very much, Ben.
So that's the end of the annual conference. For those of you that are members and joining us at the AGM, we've run over very slightly, so we will take a 5-minute comfort break. So we'll start the AGM at 4:05 rather than 4 o'clock, just so you've got time to top up your coffees and nip to the loo. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and a final thanks out to the speakers. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again soon.